This is Career Coaching X's and O's, and I'm your host, Mark Anthony Peterson, founder and thought leader at Sierra Consulting, a small business strategy and technology consulting firm. A small part of our practice is executive coaching. These episodes are the summations of some of those sessions. The title of today's episode is 7 Things to Consider Before Rehiring an Employee Who Left You for Greener Pastures. As senior managers, we've all been in a situation where an employee has come to you and said they are leaving for greener pastures. Different title, more money, more work flexibility, whatever the situation, they've decided to leave your firm and go to another firm, possibly even a competitor. Here are the 7 things I want you to consider if that person ever comes back and wants to work at your company again. First, I want you to consider doing a post-mortem on the circumstances as to why that person left. Maybe there were valid reasons for them to leave. You weren't paying enough for the job title that person had. Maybe the work environment was not as flexible as a competitor. These things you need to do root cause analysis on because 1, you could lose other key employees, and 2, if you bring this person back, you're likely to lose them again to the same reasons. What's the second thing to consider? I want you to understand how the group dynamics will change if that person comes back. Now, they may come back and want a higher salary. They may want to come back and bring with them elements from a different culture. They may come back and want the same job or a different job title. What you have to realize is that in their absence, your organization has reformed, reshaped, and started creating new norms that did not include that person. Bringing them back is going to disturb the group dynamics. Not always in a negative way, but you have to go through and make the assessment to understand if it will disrupt the group, its performance, how they connect, and their ability to be productive. If bringing that person back is more of a negative than a positive, then you need to know that up front before you decide to rehire them. The third thing you should consider: go back and really examine that person's prior performance. You want to know that they are a stellar performer, and that should be part of the framework for rehiring an ex-employee. Yeah, we take back the stellar players, but the C, D, and F performers get no consideration. If a C, D, or F performer leaves the organization, we want to give them a great party on the way out and let them know that that door is closed. What's the fourth thing you should consider? Whether or not the person is a negative influencer, a gossiper, the type of person that when things are going great, they're a great person to have around, but when things are going bad, you don't want them within 10 feet of your organization because they're the ones that will help talk it down instead of pick it up. You want to determine if they're that type of person, because that's not the type of personality that's going to help you get to the corner office. Because as soon as things go wrong, they're talking about leaving again. And that's not going to look good for the people that you lead, as well as the people you report to. What's the fifth thing? The fifth thing to consider is understand whether or not you're setting a precedent. And if you are setting a precedent, understand the implications of what you're doing. If someone can leave your group, go work for a competitor, and come back and get a higher salary, a better job position, and have only been gone for a short period of time, you're setting a precedent that's going to lead to everyone in your group wanting to leave and do the same thing. So you have to understand the implications of what sort of precedent that sets for the people in the group, for the company, for your own career, you want to understand the implications of setting that precedent, because you could create a lot more turnover just by letting that person back into the group for people who want to get the same sort of benefits. All right. They're not getting promoted, but they can force their own promotion by leaving and coming back. What's the sixth thing that you should consider before rehiring an employee who left you for greener pastures? You want to understand how your manager views that employee. You may have the greatest respect for that person's skills, and you may also believe that they're going to have a positive impact on the group. But you want to understand what your manager thinks of that person. Your manager may not share the same view of having that person return because they were not loyal to the organization to begin with. And so bringing them back could create a rift between you and your manager. I've seen it happen in a company where an individual left the sales team. He was the head of sales and went to a direct competitor to become their CEO. After a year and a half at the helm of that company, he had had enough and wanted to come back. And so he contacted the chief operating officer of the company with which I worked. The chief operating officer had a great working relationship with this gentleman, liked him personally, and wanted to bring him back into the organization. Unfortunately, the CEO did not share the same view. The CEO took it as a personal affront that he did not get an opportunity to convince him not to leave. The gentleman had already made his mind up. He wanted to be a CEO, and he was not going to listen to the counsel of the boss that he had worked for. So when he wanted to return to the organization, there was no place for him because the CEO deemed him to be someone who was not loyal. Now, had the COO gone ahead and made the move and made the rehire, that could have created a significant rift between the two. Fortunately, those two were always on the same page because they talked about issues like that and considered each other's emotions in decisions about the company. You need to make that same sort of pact and alliance with your manager before making decisions like this. If they have a visceral emotional reaction to bringing someone back, you should respect that no matter how good of an employee that person was. What's the next thing you should consider when rehiring an employee who left you for greener pastures? You should consider whether or not that person will have a career path when they return. Now, we're talking about skilled employees, so we assume they may have a career path. But if someone left you and now want to return, you got to assume that they're trying to create their own career path. There's certain skill sets, certain experiences that they are seeking that they didn't find with you the first time. So when they're returning, you want to understand if they have a true career path. And there are two subset issues you need to consider with that. One, as an organization, do you have career path for your employees? And if they don't, certainly the group that you lead, you need to start trying to create those career paths or be prepared to lose some of your best people. Secondly, coming back into an organization where you've left, you may artificially be placing a ceiling on your own head because other groups may not want to bring you in knowing that you left the company and returned. So the possibility of moving into different roles within an organization may be restricted for that employee because other managers may not want to take on the risk of having a skilled employee leave to pursue other opportunities. You should consider that and talk that through with the person that's seeking to be rehired to make them aware of the possibility that they may be pigeonholed in a position because of their previous action. Not by no fault of your own. It's just organizations work that way sometimes. And just because you're the best audience in the world, I'm going to give you one more thing to consider when rehiring an employee who left you for greener pastures. You should consider your own personal credibility and whether or not it can take another hit if this employee does not work out. Every executive has a certain amount of quote unquote street cred within their organization. As you accomplish more, that cred goes up. As you get dinged for doing things within your group that may not work out, sometimes not always by under your control, you lose a little bit of that cred. Now, when someone comes back and is looking to be rehired, you got to consider whether or not you have enough credibility to survive in the organization if this employee does not work out. When they drop the mask in an airplane, when the cabin is depressurizing, they tell you to put the mask on first and then put the mask on all others who need you second. So you need to consider what this hire could do to you if it does not work out. You got enough cred, you got enough juice, and you can handle this hire going sideways, then you may be able to move forward. But if you don't, then don't expend that capital on this hire. I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, hit subscribe. I know you will share this episode with your colleagues because the best people listen to this podcast. Tell us the issues you're struggling with in your career, and we will research them, and we might even do a podcast episode about it. If you need more support in your career, please find us on the web at ceyero.com, CEYERO.com, and let us help you develop a plan for your career. If you like this podcast, you may like some of my other podcasts. Guerrillapreneur, The Art of Waging Small Business Warfare, talks to business mavericks and entrepreneurs about ways that they're disrupting the marketplace. If you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and want to know what it's like on the front lines every day, Guerrillapreneur is the podcast for you. If you're in the midst of the gig economy and thinking about participating in it in one form or fashion, then my podcast, Gigging, Everything in the Sharing Economy, is the podcast for you. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Ceyero Consulting. Guys, before I let you go, though, I want to tell you that I'm teaming up with Airbnb Open Homes, a program that enables community members to offer free, temporary housing for people displaced by disasters. Guys, we're right in the middle of hurricane season, and we've seen a lot of activity. We've seen Tropical Storm Barry. We've seen Dorian. And so one of our greatest needs is making sure that every resident has a safe place to stay during one of these disasters. If you are able to offer free temporary housing for neighbors impacted by disasters, sign up to be an open homes host by going to airbnb.com/mpeterson. That's airbnb.com/M as in Mary, PETERSON, all one word. You will only be contacted when there is a need. This has been Career Coaching X's and O's, and I am your host, Mark Anthony Peterson, founder and thought leader at Ceyero Consulting.